Okay, so in this tutorial, we're going to have a look at the preferences in Traktor and show you some of the various options you have to customize your individual Traktor setup. So again, to access preferences, we click up here. The first thing we're going to look at is audio setup. This is where you'll find information about Traktor's audio options. So in audio device here, this is where we select what sound card we're using with Traktor. So the default will generally be built in, which is your computer's built-in sound card. But as soon as you connect a sound card, an external sound card to your system, you'll see an option there appear with the sound card's name on it, which in my case is the Duet here. So that's the first place you go once you have connected your external sound card and installed the drivers for it. You will select the sound card from that option. Down below it we have sample rate. This allows you to choose a sample rate depending on your sound card. Typically we use 40 or 100. Higher sample rates are available, but they do stress your computer more, so we tend to stick to that. Audio latency, again, this is where you choose a latency that is suitable for your laptop and for the sound card you're using. I'm using quite a low latency here at 11.5 milliseconds because I've got quite a high spec laptop and a high spec sound card. If you're using your built-in sound card, you might need to put that up higher. And again, this is the kind of thing that you would look at if you are using Traktor and you hear audio dropouts or artifacts or any kind of pops or clicks in the audio. You'll need to go in and adjust the latency there, and you can do that by moving this slider up and down until you find that the audio clicks and dropouts actually disappear. So next on our menu here is output routing. This is where we go to select firstly the type of mixing mode that we're using in Traktor. So we have internal mixing and external mixing. Output monitor, this allows us to select what channels on our sound card we are sending the pre-listen, the preview for our tracks. So we select them there, and again this is where we send our master output. Again, this will depend on the type of sound card and how many channels you have on your sound card. And this is where you would set up a record channel from your sound card as well. So for example, if I had the audio 8 and I wanted to record on channels channel D with output 7 and 8, I would input them in here. So external, then you'll see when we flick between internal and external, the screen actually changes here. The interface for Traktor, the mixing controls disappear when we go to external mode, and that's because we're doing all our mixing on an external mixer, which will be our club mixer or whatever mixer that we actually use. So if you're using external mixer mode, you can send 4 decks to your mixer, each on its own channel. So if you have a mixer with 4 faders, 4 channels that you can utilize, you can send deck A to channel 1 using these outputs here, deck B to channel 2, deck C to 3, and deck D to 4, and so on. So that's basically where you would go to do that. This allows you to select a channel where you want to preview the preview player if you want to pre-fade that on your system. But generally, you may not need to use the preview player, because if you've got 4 decks set up going out to 4 channels on your mixer, you'll have pre-fade controls on your mixer. And this here allows you to choose an output pair for sending effects. So again, you would just select the channel in there. So next on our menu then is the input routing, and this is typically where we would look if we are connecting a different input or a different external device to our sound card. So if I was connecting up a microphone and I might want that on channel A, for example, we spoke about in one of the earlier tutorials about using the through input on Traktor's decks. This is where you would configure that. Having selected what deck you're going to use, you would go in here and you would select what channels you want to utilize. So you've got 4 decks in Traktor. You can select external devices for any one of those 4 decks, and you just configure it in this menu here. And again, the input send is for inputting a pair of send effects, and the swap input channel here, that just allows you to swap the input channels A and B or C and D. So the next item on our menu is the MIDI clock. We would select this option if we want to send MIDI information to another MIDI enabled device. So typically if we're trying to sync up two machines running MIDI, Traktor will send a MIDI clock by clicking on this button. And this MIDI clock sending offset, you would typically use that if you're finding that there are maybe delay or sync issues between the two devices that you are trying to MIDI sync, and you would adjust that MIDI clock sending offset to compensate for any delay that you have found. So next on our menu is the timecode setup. Now, these tutorials were mostly based around the Traktor software itself, so we didn't really look at the timecode aspect and connecting turntables and CD players and that kind of thing. But I'll just give you a quick sort of run through these if you are using timecode. It's useful to know what these are anyway. This allows you to choose the input mode for your sound card, so you can have timecode vinyl, CD, or line. The timecode control inputs here, they give you a visual feedback of the quality of the timecode control signal there. The decoder gain, this is where the volume of the incoming time control signal is displayed. A higher gain signal normally means that you've got better control tracking. This is where you can assign your time codes to each of the individual decks. Track start position, again, this is something that you would use if, for example, the start of your timecode vinyl had worn out, so you've lost the first minute of your vinyl. You can select to start the tracking start position at a different position on the record. If you prefer to use 45 RPM over 33 RPM on your vinyls, you would select there. The tracking alert, if your timecode control signal becomes bad, the tracking buttons start flashing red, and while the red flashing is normal when you move the record back and forth, if it's red during normal playback, you may have dust or something like that under the needle, so that'll just alert you to that fact. This here, when this is selected, this will basically mean that Traktor will load the next track whenever you turn over the record. Use playlist scrolling zone. If you have this selected, you can use your vinyl or your CD to scroll through your playlists on the screen. And to switch to absolute mode, again, this depends on the type of mode that you're using in Traktor, but when you place the needle in the lead in of the control vinyl or skip to the first track on the control CD, the tracking mode switches to absolute mode when you have this selected here. And again, it'll switch to absolute mode when you actually load the track if you have selected this option here. So next on our menu is loading. Okay, so the first item in the menu here, loading only onto stop deck. I would typically have this selected. This basically prevents you from accidentally loading a track into a deck that's already playing. You really don't want that to happen. So if you have that selected, Traktor will flash up a warning if you attempt to do it. Stop playback at the end of track. Yes, you want the playback to stop at the end of the track. Duplicate the deck when loading same track. If you have this option selected and you have a track playing in deck A and you load the same track into deck B, Traktor will basically duplicate the behavior of track A, so it will pick up the playback position wherever it is on deck A in deck B. The next option here is load next at the end of the track. This enables Traktor to automatically load the next track from the active playlist. For example, the playlist that the currently playing track is in. But switching to another playlist during playback doesn't activate another playlist. Initially queue to load marker. This is if you want Traktor to go straight to the load marker whenever you load up a track, so I would generally have that one selected. Activate fade in, fade out markers. I don't really use this, but you would use the fade in, fade out markers for automatic fade in and fade outs between tracks when you're doing automatic crossfading, or you're in cruise mode where it just basically plays through the playlist for you. Cruise loops playlist. This option affects the cruise mode again when you're in autoplay mode, so with this option checked, Traktor will repeat the playlist from the beginning when the end of the list is reached. Resetting controls then. This will reset all deck controls to their default value when a track is loaded. So you'll typically want that selected. Otherwise, the last settings that you had on the individual deck will remain anytime you load up the track. Reset all mixer controls. Again, if you have this selected, it will reset the mixer controls to their default for when you load the track, as opposed to the previous state that you left them in. So in our next tutorial, we'll take a look at the next few items in our menu here in the preferences section.